Are we ready for some bot excitement? Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. So I suppose we'll dive straight into the questions. Kate, bad bots. How big a problem are bad bots?
Well, it's interesting, Rob, because here in Ireland, there's actually double the bad bot traffic that there is in the rest of the world. Why that is, I don't know.
We're special.
That's right. So there are extra bad bots, and if you're wondering what a bot is, it's a piece of software that executes certain automated actions. So where we find at Imperva the trend lies is bots that are capitalizing on business logic errors, so human errors. An example of that would be if you're a bank and you, in your transfer form, accept a negative $1,000 transfer initiated by the recipient, effectively, they can steal money from people's bank accounts. So that would be an example of a business logic bad
Do we know
bot.
why Ireland is so high?
We don't. I was thinking yesterday about the census summary that came out, and I wonder if that'll give us any more insights. In terms of sectors, Ireland is like much of the rest of the world, where the activities in finance and government agencies, that's where we see the highest rate of attacks.
Interesting. Jenni, what are the key things organizations should do or implement for better cyber resilience and to mitigate bad bots?
So there are a couple of things that everyone can do. I think the most important thing is around accountability. So IT is no longer an IT problem. It's now an organizational problem. It needs to get right to the top and right to the board. There's also some new regulations coming in. So NIS2 and DORA, they're very much focused around management bodies being responsible. So I think hopefully that will maybe bring the change that we need. I also think basic hygiene, right? So having good passwords, having accounts that you know are the right, least privilege, all that kind of stuff. Also reviewing the accounts. Do you know who's accessing them? Should those people have that permission? Other things then you could look at would be access management, right? So if you do not know what you have, how can you secure it? Again, security monitoring is very important. Having your EDRs, having your SIEMs, having a SOC, they're all really great things. Vulnerability management needs to be effective, right? So patching needs to be done, very, very important, but also scanning, testing, penetration testing, especially tabletop exercises, because everybody needs to know what their role is. And then, just having good backups as well. So like you need to know that your backups, you can actually stand over them, that they're offline. And for God's sake, people, do not keep your encryption key in your same system.
Very true, very true. Kate, cyber resilience, does it drive organizational change?
It does, but not in the way you might think. So, you know, Jenni is very expert in her space, and she's right, because you can't get insurance or other coverage that you need if you're not making that organizational change. But the way I see change arrives is actually from customers, because they won't do business with you if you can't meet their security requirements.
Interesting. Jenni, how do you keep your risk exposure under control?
So this is a really good one, right? So what I see in a lot of my clients is they're going through maturity exercises. And my problem, my own bugbear with maturity exercises is it kind of gives equal weighting to the whole process. I think really to get the best value for money, you need to take a risk-based approach. You need to be able to identify where the critical areas are and wrap the best controls around them. Not to say that we're going to push out the non-critical areas, but just you know where to throw your money. I think as well, there's a lot in that. I've just drawn blank.
But Jenni, I think to that point, GDPR really pushed us in this direction starting in 2018.
Yes.
So I'll have customers come to me and say, but you don't have A, B, C, D, and E on every single system. And my response is because the technical and organizational measures should be commensurate to the risk. So you don't need to defend your entire estate with the marquee defense mechanisms. You need to identify where your risk is greatest, whether it's encryption keys, as you mentioned, or whether it's other credentials, or whether it's SSL certificates. However the compromise might be accomplished, that's where you want to focus your greatest attention and resources.
And I think as well, pick a framework that works for your organization. So basically know what your objectives are, your business strategic objectives, and build it out from there. I think compliance should be the last step. You should never start with compliance because you're just ticking the boxes. You're not going to get the best value for money and the best thing for your organization. So I'd say pick your framework, roll it out, and then layer up the compliance.
I would challenge one statement there though, right? Because a framework can actually be really effective if you don't use it as a check the box, other than as a check the box customer requirement.
Yes.
So for example, ISO 27001, APEC PRP or CBPR certifications, PCI DSS if you're processing credit card data, those can be really effective frameworks because if you meet them, your customers have the assurance that somebody, a third party, has checked you and you meet reasonable standards. Because under GDPR, we're all supposed to be auditing each other. Who can do that?
Yeah.
Who has an army of auditors other than the super highly regulated large financial institutions going around and auditing everybody else? So there has to be sort of a fallback mechanism that we can use. I see, being in cyber security, I see a lot of people using those attestations, ISO, PCI DSS, and others, SOC 2, SSAE 18, using them to substitute for the lack of an auditing workforce.
And just one final point on that is awareness, right? So awareness is key. We are humans. We do make mistakes. It doesn't take much. We can be tired, bad night's sleep, all that kind of stuff. But really, with ChatGPT coming out now, like originally with training, we were told to look for bad English, spelling mistakes, these kind of errors, and ChatGPT is going to eradicate all of those. So I think we need to bring that awareness piece to more than an annual exercise. It needs to be part of our everyday.
Phishing should be monthly,
yeah,
if not weekly, in an organization.
So would it be fair to say then that keeping your risk exposure under control is both objective to a framework like ISO 27001 and subjective based on observed risks and perceptions?
Yeah.
They should really tie together because otherwise how are you going to know when you've succeeded to the extent you can succeed?
Yeah.
Good point. Jenni, what are the benefits of strong cyber resiliency?
Okay, so I love this one, right? So this is very much hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, right? You have to kind of take the stance that the breach or the broken control has already happened. That's really what good resilience is. Like, we spend a lot of money on these tools, like EDR, antivirus, firewalls. They do break. What do you do when it breaks? So I did have a client recently. We were talking about cyber insurance and about getting his maturity level up high. And he was like going, yeah, but I'm going to spend all this money on rolling out EDR across my enterprise. I don't need insurance. And I was like, well, just because you have the tool doesn't mean that you're secure. Like, you can go out and spend loads of money on a very fancy lock for your door. They will get in the window.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think if the attackers want in, they will get in. And no amount of fancy tools is going to stop. However, it does help increase the resiliency.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that's right. I look at the layers of defense like a maze. So no one should be able to come straight in. And you hope that their ball going through the little maze will get stuck at one of your secondary, tertiary. Really, in my mind, you want to have at least 7 or 8 separate layers so that each one increases your chance of defense.
Exactly, yeah.
I have to say, I love your mentioning the definition of basically assuming the bad guy's already in. It's one of the tenets of zero trust is to assume a breach is inevitable or has already likely occurred. So you can't hide behind firewalls anymore. You can't hide behind a perimeter. You have to assume that the bad guy is already in and take it from there. What can they do? Can they exfiltrate data? Can they encrypt data? Can they do damage basically from that position? So I really love you.
I think a lot of people as well, they think, well, why would they target me? So like, I'm only a little guy, I do food and beverage, or I'm in my industry, why would they attack me? And it's like, well, then maybe they're not targeting you, they're just looking for an open avenue. Absolutely. Like, you have to look at the hackers' motivations as well. They're not always doing it for financial gain, they're just building a reputation. They want to be known, I'm the guy that took those down. So yeah, I think definitely the lowest lying fruit will always get picked first, but everybody's open to attack.
Well, and in that vein, obviously I'm from the United States. One of the things we often reference is the Target breach. I don't know if it made news over here, but it affected millions of Americans. And the way that the Target breach occurred was it was the refrigerator vendor who did software for Target's refrigeration system for its groceries in the store. So the end game was Target.
Yeah.
And the credit card data and the other data that the hackers were able to exfiltrate.
And that brings in the whole supply chain risk as well, right? Because again, NIST2 and or do call out that you need to manage your supply chain. And a lot of that, either upstream or downstream, it can impact. It can lead to business disruptions, and it can have reputational damage as well.
And it brings you back to those standards, right? That's why I see customers driving the largest transformational change. Because if you want to do business, you will meet a standard, some objective standard assessed by a third party. Or you'll lose the business realistically because your competition most likely will.
Can I ask you the same question, Kate? Are there any other benefits of strong cyber resiliency that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, besides reputational risk, which is separate, customers will leave you. I don't like to say the B word, because when you say the B word, you have legal obligations. So I always refer to it as a security incident. And actually at Imperva, I'm the one who analyzes the laws to determine whether we actually have a reporting obligation, and that's when the B word comes into play.
Okay.
But so there are so many benefits, but realistically, what I foresee happening is the market for companies without third-party attestations, I see it becoming substantially tighter, because NIST2 will level up again. GDPR, was a huge level up, even for non-European-based companies. It still forced much of the world to level up. In the United States, well, we're going to have a 50-state solution, which will all be different for some extended period of time. Canada is modernizing its laws, and so all of these laws eventually are going to force the population of multinational companies to move. We actually implemented GDPR as a single global standard, because we have operations worldwide. And I'm fortunate enough that Imperva believes privacy is a fundamental human right, and I'm empowered to put that in action every day. And by using GDPR as our standard, we feel we can give the market confidence that they can trust what's happening with our data. How do they know? We got a third-party attestation, right? Because everybody says, I comply with GDPR. And then you lift page 1 of the response to their questionnaire, and you're like, oh no, So it's that third-party attestation requirement is really just going to continue to rise up.
Jenni, insurance.
That's the good bit.
Yes. What are the common requirements for cyber insurance, and how does it align to resiliency?
So, right, I'm just actually building on your last point. So what we're seeing now with some clients is the reason they want insurance is for a tick box exercise. So they're going for tenders, they're going for contracts, and they're not getting signed up without the insurance. Now, as most people are aware, the market did get very, very hard last year. It is softening up a little bit, but the rigor is still there. The underwriter rigors, they want to know. They're also learning from the breach history, right? So cyber insurance is different from traditional insurance because we all know how buildings burn. We all know how cars get crashed. But because the attackers are changing the landscape every time, the breaches are happening different. So you've got attackers that are sitting in your system and they're listening and they're watching, they're exfiltrating data, they're blackmailing people, all of this stuff is going on, right? So really, where does insurance and resiliency join together? It's on that security piece. So MFA, right? Have it everywhere. Have it where you don't need it, because it is. Now, it's not infallible. It's 99% good. I know there are ways around it, but from a straight up, do you have MFA?
Absolutely.
Quite good. PAM is huge. Have privilege access management. So do you know who has the privileged accounts? Do you know who has access to your domain admins? Do you know where your service accounts are and who's using them, and what's, is there auditable kind of files and logs that can be taken from that? Again, supply chain risk is big, the whole M&A risk. So if you're buying a new company, do you know that they've got good cyber? Are you now opening this into your own kind of realm? Again, have an EDR, SOC, all those kind of good things. But what I found actually reading the NIST2, there's a lot of alignment between cyber insurance and the NIST2 requirements. So I think as people prepare for those new regulations, the cyber maturity will rise. I don't know if insurance is going to get easier or harder because of it. So time will tell on that one.
I mean, I honestly assume today that if there were an event and I were to make a tender for coverage, maybe I have a 50% chance. Because I feel like the policies have been written substantially more narrowly.
Yes.
And even, I think it was Merck who had the great victory in the United States. They were able to use their general liability insurance to get coverage for cyber. Already, Lloyd's of London announced, well, we'll be writing it differently.
Yeah.
And I feel like compared to the policies that I would read 5 to 10 years ago, where I could every time we got a policy, it's been my job for a long time to make the tender, I would go through the policy and flag, I need to notify this person within this period of time. So I had it so that game day, if I had to make a tender, I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I had analyzed it in a not stress situation.
Yeah.
Now I go through the policy and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen.
And
like,
that's
hope for the best.
thing. So it used to be going for cyber insurance, you had 5 questions, like what's your turnover, all this kind of stuff, right? Now, depending on your actual insurer, you could have anywhere between 50 and 200 questions. A lot of these questions are yes or no. Cyber is not a yes or no world.
No.
So what I do for Aon is I shine light on the grey areas. I bring out the yes buts. So yes, I've got legacy technology, but it's fully segregated and we have deep security running on those servers. So no, we don't have MFA everywhere, but we do have these other controls in place. And I think from having those conversations with our clients, we're able to get them a much better deal. They're getting much better premiums, and they have that support.
I actually asked that question of a colleague of yours earlier. I was like, look, if companies do take all these steps, if they do all the right things, is it a question that they're more likely to get insurance or that they'll pay less for insurance? His answer was basically both.
It depends. Like, again, if you look at motor insurance, right? So if you've got a really good car with like the best immobilizer, you've got your NCT, you've got really good tires, does it bring your premium down? Maybe. Depending on where you live, it definitely does.
Yeah.
So again, it's going to be industry specific, and we're seeing a lot of attacks now in manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, do you know, that kind of way? So it's going to be a little bit harder for them. And also there's the whole OT, or operational technology aspect of it, right? So patching in your IT environment, it's done very regularly, I would hope, Patch Tuesdays. In an OT environment, it could be like a decade before those machines get patched. And back in the day, it wasn't an issue because the OT ran, the IT ran. Or now there's a convergence. Things are getting automated, things are clicking in, and what we're given is attack vectors into our OT environments. So that's just leading to further problems.
Kate, how do audits like ISO and GDPR help organizations objectively assess their readiness for insurance requirements?
I think it's more than just an internal assessment that it enables. It can be very eye-opening for internal stakeholders to see, hey, there's a gap here. But I think it gives, more importantly, your business partners confidence that you are who you claim to be, because you have to meet the objective standards to get ISO or to get GDPR validation. I found anecdotally, so I've worked at different places which have had GDPR validation. I found it cuts our contract cycle time 4 to 6 weeks, because as a US headquartered company, everyone assumes you don't know GDPR. But having that independent assessment where they've done a deep dive on our practices really helps enable more productive conversations, not just prove to me that you're compliant, but can we have a more sophisticated discussion on what's your transfer impact assessment, or how do you manage transfers, or all of those things. So it really can quiet some of the side noise in a deal cycle when you're looking to do business as a multinational.
Absolutely. We're actually going through that process ourselves at the moment. So it's quite
sounds fun.
Right. A final question for both of you. Are there things that insurance companies ask for that don't bring value?
So obviously I'm completely biased.
Of course.
So I'm going to say no. I think they're not trying to make life hard. They're doing it because they're looking at claims data. They're looking at breaches. They're looking at where they're paying out, right? So obviously insurance companies do pay out, but they don't like doing it. It's the business model, right? So personally, yes, I think it is important. There's a lot about cyber insurance that covers off that business interruption piece, right? So a really good example is we had a manufacturing client. They produced food. They got hit with a ransomware. So while they were still able to make the food, they couldn't print the labels to stick on the food. And obviously, it's sandwiches. It's going to go off in 2 to 3 days. They also had certain allergen labels that were misprinted and stuff. So that can lead to massive impacts. They had to shut down their lines. They had missed their customer contracts. So the insurance kind of helps balance that out. Also, you can have what's called an incident response retainer. So if something happens, you pick up the phone, you know exactly who to call. And there's a whole team of comms people, forensic analysts, and they can come and then pretty much get you back running. So I'm going to say, yes, we all need insurance.
I'll tell you a very quick, very funny story. I'm aware, well, that's not really very funny, but I'm aware, so in my previous life I worked for an IT company, and a customer of theirs, a few years ago now, the MD got phished. So somebody got access to his email, and an email was sent from him to their accounts person saying, send 250,000 euros to this bank account. The accounts person duly obliged. 250,000 euros gone. Now, my understanding of what happened after that was they went to the insurance company and they said, are you going to cover us for this? And the insurance company said, are you mental? You sent 250,000 euros on foot of an email with no verification. Of course we're not going to insure you. Justifiably so.
But it brings it back to motor insurance, right? So you've got your beautiful fancy car with all its deadly locks. You don't lock it. You go off to the shop and you come back and you're like, oh, my car's gone. Well, like, you didn't lock your car. You didn't check your mails.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the example you gave goes to employee training. I would say I haven't seen a trend where the whole market is moving away from insurance. The trend I'm seeing is increased self-insured retention. So that means what effectively in the US we would call it a deductible. So the amount you pay before your insurance kicks in. I also worry because the policy language covers so substantially much less compared to a decade ago. So from a business value, I think there's a challenge there. I think the market's probably approaching a pivot point where a segment of the market is going to say, for the price you're charging me and the coverage you're giving me, I'm better off self-insuring this particular risk because the premiums are so astronomical right now.
Yes, but that only works for your global companies and your big companies. It's the mediums to small don't really have...
I think it depends, right?
True.
It depends on your cash flow. It depends on how sophisticated your internal controls are. It depends on if you have other risk mitigators in place.
Yeah.
Especially because some policies exclude, consequential damages. So the fact I couldn't sell my sandwiches in your example, I get nothing for that. I get no coverage. So what have I bought with this policy? Like,
you need a really good broker. You should come to Aon.
Touché.
Actually, we are. But it can be challenging to assess accurately the value of a policy these days. I see insurance companies probing more. The questionnaires are 100% lengthy, or lengthier than they were even 2 years ago. And some of the questions they ask, I'm like, why is this a line of valuable inquiry to you? What risk are you informing? Or
so I know there are some insurers that ask some strange questions, right? But they do have a logic behind it. So sometimes if how you answer one question can lead into something else that they're maybe thinking. But I have had a lot of clients that have tried to answer a form on a Friday afternoon and they're like, these words, that's not even English. Do you know, that kind of way? So it's not an easy game, but it is worth it in the end.
I have had that experience. So again, in my previous life working for an IT company, I've helped people fill those forms in. I remember the forms when there were 5 questions. Do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? How old is your equipment? Is it patched? And all tick, yeah.
Off
fine,
you go, there you go, yeah.
I've seen more recent forms as well. And I mean, there's literally dozens, if not, more questions. And as you said, some lead into others. And if you answer this one wrong, then...
And it does feel as well like you can give them everything, they'll still come back with something. It's like their job is to just come up with a difficult question. And you'll give them all the information in the world and they'll just like, no, but what about this? You're like,
But as you said, it is getting a little bit easier. Would that be fair to say?
I would say the market, we're getting better terms and better rates.
Yeah,
But the vigor is still there. They're still
adjusted.
grilling people, and it feels like the insurers are learning more about IT. So they're
Yeah.
kind of coming out of their sphere into ours.
Absolutely.
And the more they learn, the more they want to know. Was like, but tell us about this. So like, as I said, Pam, like service accounts, they're all over that. It is super important.
Because service accounts are a high area of risk. They're generally less monitored.
Yeah.
Often credentials go stale, but they're not deactivated.
Yeah.
Service accounts can be a huge compromise vector.
And things like not rotating your passwords. So like the same, or hard-coded passwords. These are the things that keep us up at night.
Well, I've seen Niamh has just stood up, and I've been warned that we're going to be forcibly ejected off the stage if we don't finish up on time. So I'd like to thank you both very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.